Next, let's talk about road wander. So in this case, again, find a safe condition, safe straight stretch of road. Keep that steering wheel straight ahead. Just hold it steady and see where the coach goes. Is it darting in different directions? Does it feel like it has a mind of its own? And again, you need to be aware of wind conditions and road crown, as well as ruts in the road when you're testing for drift, as these can all affect the results of this test. And I do want to emphasize for this that unlike steering pull, road wander is inconsistent. So with steering pull, the coach is always going in a given direction. With road wander, it varies. Sometimes it wants to go left, sometimes it wants to go right. It's just hard to keep it going in any one direction. So again, this can be due to an alignment problem. So I'll say again that if the alignment has never been checked and or if you've noticed some unusual tire wear, then we would recommend getting an alignment. Steering gear adjustment can also be a factor in this case. So sometimes play in the steering from an overly loose steering gear, or conversely, stiffness in the steering from an overly tight gear can lead to the feeling of wander. Now, the worst case is when you've got both issues present. So if the steering gear is really stiff on center, but backing off the adjustment doesn't get rid of the stiffness but only adds play. So in this case, we would recommend getting a new or ideally a precision rebuilt steering gear to replace the factory one. But this is something that we would recommend having evaluated by a professional shop because there's quite a bit of expense involved in getting a replacement steering gear. So you definitely want to be sure that that is in fact the issue. Another thing that we look at quite frequently is weight distribution. So remember that E450 that we looked at that was popping wheelies earlier? That's an example of a coach that's likely too light on the front and probably has issues with road wander. So we do have different guidelines for what the ratio of front axle weight versus rear axle weight should be. So for a Class A, generally we want to see at least a third of the total weight on the front axle and no more than 2/3 of the total weight on the rear axle. So another way of saying this is if you have, let's say, 20,000 pounds on your rear axle, you would want to see at least 10 on the front. So that 1-to-2 ratio of front axle weight versus rear axle weight. Now, there are some differences for Class C coaches. Those can still drive okay, closer to 40%. But when you start getting too far below 40%, then we start getting concerned on those as well. So just picture this as like a pickup truck with a heavy load in the back, full load of firewood or gravel. The thing's bottomed out. That steering can be very twitchy. It can be difficult to keep in a straight line. The same is true with a motorhome. So talking about weight distribution, in order to identify if you have an issue, you really do at minimum need to get your front and rear axles weighed individually at a truck scale, like a CAT scale. Ideally, you would get a four-corner weigh. There are some shops where, like ours, where they have individual scales they can put under each wheel. That can be helpful because it can tell you if you have a side-to-side weight distribution issue as well. But at minimum, a CAT scale can be good just to get those front and rear axle weights individually. It's also important to consider your wheelbase length. So, worth noting that for a given chassis, in general, the shorter the wheelbase, the greater the tendency to wander. So we see this in the lower gross vehicle weight rating, shorter F53 chassis, the shorter Freightliners as well. Also, the really short power glides like the Tiffin Allegro Breeze. So again, when we're talking about wheelbase, we're looking at the length between the front axle and the rear axle. And so the shorter that is, especially compared to the overall length of the coach, then the more of a tendency to wander you're going to have. And we talked about this for steering play, but it can also affect road wander. So does the design of the suspension allow unwanted movement in the axle, either the front or the rear axle? If so, front or rear track bars, as well as front radius rods, can help. So there's our video again showing that movement in the F53 front leaf spring bushings. So in the case of a front track bar, there is the Roadmaster Davis True Track Bar. So this serves to locate that front axle laterally, so control side-to-side movement. and that can really cut down on just a feeling of vagueness in the steering, of wander, because it lets that axle be only moving up and down and not have unwanted side to side movement. There's also our front radius rods, which similarly to the front track bar, they control unwanted movement in that front axle, but instead of controlling the lateral movement, they control the forward and backward movement. But both serve to just to locate that front axle. And on the topic of front track bar, it is worth noting that in about 2007, Ford did actually start putting a front track bar on the F53 chassis from the factory on most coaches. Now, the lightest gross vehicle weight rating units, like the 16 and 18K, even today still may not be coming with a front track bar, but most of the F53s are coming with a front track bar and have been equipped with that from the factory. So just goes to show that Ford actually realized that there was an issue there where those leaf springs and the spring bushings themselves were just not doing an adequate enough job of locating that front axle. So also a self-centering steering stabilizer, such as the Safety Plus, can reduce road wander by providing a more positive center point to your steering. Again, it's important that it be adjusted properly to hold you straight down the road, and also that there aren't other issues that you're potentially trying to mask. So we would still recommend that you look at obviously your alignment, your weight distribution. Also look to see if there could be unwanted movement in that front axle that could also be contributing to the issue. But Safety Plus steering stabilizer will really help to reduce that unwanted movement. It's also worth noting that tire selection can have an impact on road wander. So tires with a more blocky, tall tread can have more of a tendency to wander compared to more of a ribbed highway type tire. So there on the right, you can see the block tread tires, then on the left, the ribbed. So the ribbed is just going to have a lot more directional stability. It's going to be a lot more solid too, not going to have as much squirm to it. So if you have some flexibility in your tire selection, then looking at more of a ribbed highway tire can help improve your stability and cut down on that road wander.